All right, we are live on YouTube now, and I'm about to let everybody in just a few seconds. All right, here we go. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining us, we're letting everybody in. Welcome. This is the Renters Alliance Renter Town Hall. Good evening, everyone. If you're just signing on, we're waiting a couple of minutes to let everybody in the door. Welcome. We're just getting started. If you're just signing on, welcome. Letting people in. Just letting folks in. If you're just signing on, we're just getting started. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Welcome. If you're just signing on, we're just still waiting folks to jump on. You understand the county executive is leaving one meeting and about ready to join us. I expect the same of Council President Hucker. And there's the county executive. All right, and I guess we'll get started. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Losak. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance. Thank you all for joining us and choosing us instead of being outside barbecuing on such an absolutely beautiful day. So thank you all. Couple things. We are recording. This is live on YouTube, and it is open to everybody. So we will ask you to put questions and concerns in the chat. Myself and our board chair, William Roberts, will monitor the chat to make sure questions get asked of the county executive and other officials on the call. We will get to them as we go, but we do have a program. And first, I'd like to start off by welcoming and introducing the chair of the board of directors of the Montgomery County Renters Alliance, William Roberts, to say a little introductory remarks. William?
Well, thanks, Matt, and good evening, everyone. Really appreciative of being able to be with you all tonight and to hear both from the voices of some renters around our community to talk about what's going on in the lives of tenants, and to hear especially from our county executive, Mark Elrich, and county council president, Tom Hucker. As Matt said, I am William Roberts. I'm proud to be the chair of the board of the Renters Alliance. You all hopefully know who we are by now, but if you don't, we are the only voice in the county organized specifically around renter and tenant education and advocacy and organizing. Frankly, we not only work in the policy arena on policy matters that help to protect and empower tenants at the state and the county level, but we also do a lot of work with tenants, groups of tenants, to help form tenants associations and inform people of their rights, and also to help keep tenants out of the eviction pipeline. And that's some of what we're gonna talk about tonight. Just for context on where we are in the pandemic and the eviction crisis that it's really added fuel to. We certainly know that the high water mark for evictions and affordable housing was not before COVID-19. We had a crisis in the offing, a crisis coming, but the pandemic has really exacerbated that. Since last week, Montgomery County courts have processed something like 4,000 eviction filings, and many of these have been disturbingly, a lot of them have been judgments against tenants who aren't able or don't show up to court, and folks who also simply haven't really received the relief that they need yet to be able to pay their rent. And so, it's the reason that we believe that the time for people to learn about their rights is not when they're in the eviction pipeline, and certainly not when they're in landlord tenant court. But we know we're seeing a lot of people who are just not being able to make those connections in time to be able to protect themselves or have themselves protected from eviction. And for folks like that who would otherwise qualify for protection and rent relief, be it through state and federal eviction orders or some other programs, we're now seeing an uptick really in landlords that are irresponsibly filing for eviction or notifying tenants that they won't renew their leases. Some property owners deciding to put tenants on month-to-month orders in order to keep the option open of filing what's called a tenant holding over eviction action, which is an action which Matt can talk about more, but can be filed against tenants for staying beyond their lease term. But it's also a tool that we're seeing used by some unscrupulous folks during this pandemic to really get around some of the eviction protections that have been put in place at the state and the county level in order to force people out of their homes. And according to the Public Justice Center, there's been an 132% increase in those kind of actions, those tenant holding over eviction filings across the board. And not only tells us that there are really some unscrupulous and irresponsible actors out there, but tells us that there are some really vulnerable folks that are stuck, and you really need some help to be able to be provided not just protection from the virus, which is still out there, although things are getting better, but protection from this crisis. And so, here at home in Montgomery County, the county government has been addressing the eviction crisis by providing millions in rental subsidies and support for legal aid. Renters Alliance and other organizations does a lot of partnership with legal aid, again, to try to help people out of that eviction pipeline. And we strongly support this effort for sure. And we're going to talk about that this evening, and you'll hear from some folks at the county level about how how these programs work, how they operate, and how you can get in the queue for them. So we strongly believe in those programs, but we also believe that sort of a second leg of the stool is to make sure that we're able to provide early direct outreach and personal guidance to renters, so that not only that renters can take advantage of the available resources, but also that they can exercise their rights and be able to negotiate their housing options, feel empowered to communicate with their landlords. If you've ever heard the Renters Alliance talk about what we need to be doing as tenants through this pandemic, you'll have heard one of those things on the list is that we want people to be talking to their landlords, certainly. And so we want you to be empowered to do that. And so, because again, we believe that the worst place for a renter to learn about their rights is on the day that you show up to eviction court. And so we're trying to avoid that from happening. And so we also find ourselves in a situation where the General Assembly and the state, unfortunately and quite unconscionably, and you heard some of that discussion if you were part of our last town hall with some of the members of our Montgomery County's General Assembly delegation, that the General Assembly neglected to pass really significant emergency renter protection legislation this session that was on the table the last day, so the last moments, and had the opportunity to do that and failed to do it despite all of the good legislation put before them, 20 some odd bills, including a major renter protection program and bills put forth by, sorry, you're going to hear my 3-year-old in the background. She's having a good time. Major protection programs put forth by delegates Vaughn Stewart and Janelle Wilkins, who are also board members here of the Renters Alliance. And so renters across the state are also now looking to local jurisdictions and local governments for help. And the county executive and council president will talk a bit about that. And so just wanted to sort of set the stage of where we are and sort of what kind of conversation we're looking to have tonight. And again, we're really happy to have the suite of county officials that we have here to share information with us about these programs. But first, looking forward to having a conversation with the county executive and the council president, and also some of the renters here to share their stories. So with that, I look forward to engaging in the conversation. And Matt, I think I'm going to turn first, since he's here, to our county executive, Mark Elrich.
And Mark, welcome. Before you start, let me just throw in, I believe that the council president has got an emergency request to balance the capital improvement plan of the CIP. And we know that that's important. So I think he's going to be pulled away, which will give us more time to hear from you, county executive, and your staff. So Mark, please.
So first of all, thank you very much. And Matt, you know all too well how dangerous it is to give me more time. So the good news is I've already kind of plotted out where I want to go in terms of talking about some of this stuff. So I don't think I'll greatly extend it, and then we can have a conversation. We know, I know personally, this is a really difficult time for people. And I share your disappointment, at the legislature's inability to deal with, this wrinkle on evictions, which is the tenant holding over piece. I mean, this is not rocket science. People have figured out that, I can't evict you because you've got COVID protection, but if I let your lease lapse, I can just say I'm not going to retain you. And it is, as they say, plain as the nose on your face what this is all about. And not protecting tenants from this, I think, is a real problem. And I really regret that, the county doesn't have the authority to do this. Because if I did, I would. And it's similar with just cause eviction. It's another example of something that if the county had the authority, we would do this. And the fact that, we can't get this through the state legislature, I think is really unfortunate for us, progressive as we like to think of ourselves. Getting housing stuff done has always been a challenge. I used to be the vice president of the Maryland Low Income Housing Coalition. And we found, back then, going into the legislature, it was a totally stacked deck against the tenants, and that you could see that, I haven't been there lately to see relationships, but when I was there, very close personal relationships between the landlord lobby and individual legislators, particularly coming out of Baltimore, and no relationship between us and those people. So it's always been a challenge getting some of this stuff done in Maryland. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging that this is a really tough thing that people are up against, because I don't have a magic bullet to deal with this one. But what we are hoping is that, for a lot of people, landlords would evict. If they evict them, they will never see the rent money. And they will be writing off large sums of money if they go ahead and evict people. The county is prepared to come in, and the total funds, what we've got from there, I see 3 tranches of money: a $58 million tranche, another 33 coming from the feds, and 28 that we were told we're getting for the state. That's about $119 million that we've got to support tenants against eviction. That's a lot of money, a lot more than we even dreamed we were going to have. So I'm really happy about that. At the same time, I hope that landlords take note of that, because there's no point in us spending this money and giving it to a landlord if they're just going to evict people. And so we think we've got an attractive carrot. We have no sticks, so this is just a carrot. But if we can get agreements to keep tenants protected in their housing, then we have the ability to help landlords recover some of the really deep losses that they've taken. And, you have to look at it to some extent from the dilemma they've got, which is the banks are knocking on their doors for mortgage payments. And so all this flows downhill. Tenants' money flows to a landlord, the landlord's money flows to a bank or, a major investing institution. And, I've talked to people that, in my world, I would have started, frankly, with the banks. I would have made the banks whole and then said, as a condition of getting my money, that you're forgiving or forbearing whatever was owed to you by the landlords, and the landlords are forbearing what was owed them by the tenants. I mean, we're starting at one end of the stream. The people who always manage to get taken care of are the people at the banking level. And I just would have satisfied their hunger. And just, if I could have gotten them to call off what's going to happen to everybody else. We know, Montgomery County is 1/3 of our residents are tenants. Renters Alliance has been doing this work for over a decade now. This has been, a really critical year for the work that's being done.
Almost 16 years, County Executive.
Is it 16? God.
2007, as you recall, we sat on a park bench in front of the YMCA and said, we ought to put together a petition.
Okay, that's not 16. That's only 13.
Feels like 16.
But it's really important work, and the tenants have been really disproportionately hit, because these are often folks in the lower income apartments who are manual laborers. They're the restaurant workers, the retail workers, the warehouse workers, who've been really disproportionately hit by COVID. There is no teleworking for them. They did not work in businesses where they could adapt to staying at home. There is no waiting on somebody or cooking from home if you work in the restaurant industry. So folks have been really hit by this hard. And, we see when we look at the maps of the county, that communities with multifamily dwellings and the zip codes are the ones that have been hit hardest by COVID. And so, we talk about essential workers, the one people who had to go to work, but, we really treated them like expendable workers. They could get sick. They had no protection for losing their jobs if they weren't documented. So we had people working sick. We had people who should have been home taking care of themselves, showing up to work because they had no protection and they knew they had to go out and pay rent. So I have a great deal of, compassion for them. And we've tried very hard, even with our vaccines, to, put a racial equity lens on this and actually target the hard to reach populations. We made a decision early on, we were not going to provide vaccines on a first come, first serve basis, because first come, first serve, the race goes to the people with computers and computer savvy. It doesn't go to people who don't speak English. It doesn't go to people who don't have computers or who don't know to go on a county website and look for help. So we made a decision we were going to reach out to people. I think we have a robust rental assistance program. We've, served a fair number of people in the first two tranches of rental assistance. It was never adequate for all the needs that were out there, but it helped. I think it's at least 4,500 tenants went through the first two phases of this, and that's important. We're anticipating now this additional money, which we think is going to be significant. And we're working already on getting that money out there. So we're hoping that we can get these tranches of money out into the community quickly. I have personally met with the judges who are seeing this docket and have talked with them and made it clear to them that we want them to encourage landlords to work out resolutions with the tenants. We know there's legal aid is up there in the courtroom, and that we let the judges know that we have a lot of money. We're prepared to spend it. So we've asked them to do what they can to encourage settlements and to have the confidence that the county government's going to be there to back people up. So hopefully that will have some effect. We are trying to get the judges to agree to sending a notice home, and the first notice of eviction goes out, explaining to tenants where they can get assistance from in order to pay rent. We have yet to get them to agree to a non-judicial letter accompanying the legal note, but we're trying to get them to do it, and we're trying to persuade the sheriff's department that they could send out the other notice of a court date, but they could also on their own, serving the county government rather than serving the court system, send out something that provides the information tenants need on eviction support. We created a letter, got other jurisdictions to sign on, petitioning the governor, along with Attorney General Brian Frosch, who pretty much always does the right thing, to extend his executive order for protections against failure to pay rent, and in order to allow time for rental assistance processing, but also to allow time for economic recovery. COVID is it's not going to go away. I don't want anybody to be deluded to think that this thing is over, but it's going to go into, let's just say, remission until we have to get everybody revaccinated again. And that's going to happen. And we're opening up. Montgomery County is going to be largely open by June 1st. That doesn't mean businesses are opening up. People who shuttered their doors are shuttered. If you sold your business, if you sold your equipment or your inventory, you're not reopening on June 1st. And a lot of people are going to be slow to reopen. And a lot of folks aren't going to reopen unless they know the landlord is not going to come knocking on their door for their 1 year of back rent. We're hoping that the federal money, which is pretty substantial, can help bail out some of those landlords. But again, they're not bail out the business owners. But again, if they don't reopen, job recovery is going to be slow. And, I've tried to remind people that people aren't even going back indoors yet. I was in Taste of Silver Spring the other night. I was one of 8 people eating in the restaurant. And we were there for an hour and a half. And people still aren't going in, even though you could go in. Yeah. And so we think recovery is going to be slower, which means hiring is going to be slower. which means tenants are going to be hit by this for longer. So the end of the COVID is not going to be the end of the misery that many tenants are going to be experiencing. So we're trying to get some forbearance. And we also asked the governor to extend protections to the tenant holdover actions. He has not ever responded to that. I don't think he's ever responded to you on that.
He's certainly been silent there.
Yeah, it's a blind spot. And, you know, it's going to be a tragic blind spot if this goes the way it looks like it's going. And I'm not confident this governor is going to extend the moratorium. So we need the federal government, which is, I think, in court this week, as I understand it, on the judge's decision.
Disorder. Yeah.
But, you know, here's the good news and bad news. Biden could issue this through an agency with authority. And the judge's ruling wasn't that the government couldn't do this. It was that the CDC didn't have authority to do this. So if Biden can't get that reversed on appeal, then we're hoping that he either does as an executive order, which he certainly could do, or designates one of his departments to do it and reinstates those protections. That's going to be critical to buy enough time to work this out.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I don't understand what landlords are thinking, because if they all evict people, the only tenants they're going to have looking for new people are the people who are evicted from another apartment building. And if you're going to hold eviction against giving somebody an apartment, which, you know, we know, and Matt, we talked about this years ago, about the list they keep of everybody who's evicted.
Yeah.
So they can use that as a reason not to rent to somebody. They're going to have a lot of tenants knocking on their doors to rent, but a lot of those tenants are going to be people who got evicted from the last apartment.
Yeah.
So
And
there's no evidence to me that there's a new crop of people dying to get into Montgomery County. We haven't had any growth in our population pretty much in about 10 years. We have no significant growth in jobs or really in people in some ways. So it's hard to picture who they think is going to fill their buildings up. And if you're just going to take on another tenant got evicted from a different building, you'd be better off not doing the evictions yourself.
Right.
yeah.
So we're hoping that rational people somehow, or we're hoping that human beings who have the capacity for being rational will actually become rational, and, you know, and let us help them.
Yeah.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, the money we put out is going to help tenants. And
It looks like, Will, the council president was pulled in a number of directions this evening, and it looks like he may have just jumped on to give us a few minutes. If you're with us, Council President Hucker, if you can hear us, maybe we know that you're pressed on at least 6 different critical issues, but if you could give us some of your time, we'd be grateful for it.
Yeah, I'm here, Matt.
So, yeah, so I'm just saying, you know, we're here to help. We're emailing the landlords. We're in communication with them. We're in communication with the federal government. We're in communication with everybody in the state government. We've got a very clear message. We have money and we want to help. And we've been working with our nonprofit housing providers. I mean, I think we've turned over every rock we can to try to get something done. We're doing what we can do. And, you know, if we get the opportunity to do more, we will absolutely do more.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know hopefully welcome news for some of the folks on our call, and some great questions have come in already. So look forward to hopping into this discussion, hearing from just a couple of tenants before we hop in, but certainly as Matt indicated, Council President Hucker's joined us for a couple minutes. Love to turn it over to you to say a few words as well.
Hey, thanks so much, Will.
Hey, Tom.
Thanks to you and Matt for organizing this, and to the county executive for all his work for tenants. My name is Tom Hucker. I'm the president of the county council, and I know so many of the people on the call, I think, represent District 5, which includes Silver Spring and Tacoma Park and White Oak and the eastern part of the county. And I'm really grateful to you, Will, and Matt, and the whole Renters Alliance for, you know, not just what you're doing tonight, but all you've been doing for so many years to stick up for the rights of tenants, because very few other organizations are out there doing it, and the deck is very much stacked against tenants. You've been a key partner during the pandemic. Sorry to be joining you late. We actually have to balance and finalize the county operating budget and capital budget tomorrow morning. So there's a lot going on for us.
But we do have an
but-
interest in that, Tom, so we're respectful.
I figured. But you all have been a key partner in this pandemic. The partnership we've had, the county has had with the Renters Alliance and the HHS and DHCA has been really important. To me as a council member, because it affects my residents so much, and really countywide. And I'm grateful to the county executive for his commitment to tenants' rights and all I caught some of his remarks as well, and we probably talk about tenants' rights every week. We've made significant progress in addressing a lot of economic and public health and crises created by the pandemic, but we're nowhere near the finish line, of course. There's a lot of need. It feels like that because we've had so many dramatic announcements in the last 2 weeks. The mask mandate yesterday, the reopening that we got to vote for on Tuesday, and the additional openings that will come on the 28th, which is 2 weeks after 50% of our residents receive their first dose, which is when they all have full immunity. However, we're at about 60% of our residents getting their first dose. That means 40% haven't. And the last thing we need is a big resurgence of this or a new variant coming in. So for any of you out there that haven't gotten your vaccine, please get your vaccine. You can just go right over to the Silver Spring Civic Building. You can make an appointment, but please just feel free to walk in. You won't wait in line. You won't even feel a thing. It doesn't cost you a penny, and you'll be safe, and you'll keep everybody else safe as well. And you can have a cool sign like that, like Matt's holding up. But from the beginning of the pandemic, all the council members have been really focused on keeping residents in their homes and making sure they're not evicted. So the council's appropriated $53 million in rental assistance, $718,000 in funds to nonprofit partners for legal services and for tenant support. And in fact, the rental assistance is currently open. So if any of you are behind on rent, please apply for up to $12,000 in rental assistance at mc311.com/rent relief. mc311.com/rent relief. Can you hear me okay? Because I got a notice that my connection was unstable.
Hear you fine.
Okay. Wave at me if not, and I can go closer to the router. 4,000 residents have now applied for this round of rental assistance, which is great. And it's sort of first come, first serve. So please get your place in line before the money's all gone. There's never enough money for these things like this. I realize the need is greater than the resources, but we are all committed on the council to helping tenants get through this pandemic safely and stay in their homes. The county executive included in the budget $89 million for affordable housing, which is the highest in the county's history, and we're going to pass it. $15 million for the Working Families Income Supplement Program, which is the parallel to the federal and the state EITC, Earned Income Tax Credit. I don't know why we renamed it at the county level, but we did. But the idea that we're reducing the taxes, the county taxes for working families, which is a great thing to do. Our income tax and our property tax by state law are flat. Any ways we can use to make our tax code more progressive, in my mind, are a good thing to do. And the Working Families Income Supplement is one way to do that, by lowering the taxes for our low-income residents to reward work and recognize their hard work. An additional $5 million we passed to expand the program, not just to those of us who are American citizens, but to undocumented residents as well, because they're working hard and paying their taxes just like the rest of us, and they ought to benefit from the tax relief just like all the rest of us. They're our residents and our neighbors as well. There's $14 million for the creation of the Housing Opportunity Fund. That fund will serve as a tool for short-term financing and enable some of our nonprofit housing developers to make timely bids to preserve the affordable housing that's threatened countywide, and it'll benefit communities along the Purple Line and other transit corridors where the property values are increasing. We don't want the rents to increase, so it's going to be a way for nonprofits to maintain the affordable housing that we currently have in the county. I want to talk to you for a minute about the Window Safety Act, because all of you helped with that. I introduced that bill to create safe home environments for our renters, for children living in apartments and condos, because we have seen far too many cases of infants and toddlers falling out of windows, open windows in Montgomery County. There are thousands of them that die each year. We have more than our share in Montgomery County. And the most recent was late last year when 2-year-old Ezekiel Gumezi died after falling out of a window in his family's Tacoma Park apartment. There was another child the previous year who fell out of a window, an 11th floor window in Tacoma Park, and miraculously lived, and another child who fell out of a window in Gaithersburg that year as well. So this is not we do a lot of complicated things. This is not a complicated thing. This bill just requires simple little grids that you can buy for $20 at Home Depot on windows of any apartments where there are children under 10, and it requires the landlords to pay for them and to install them. And the Renters Alliance and CASA and other good groups helped pass that law. We're about to sign it with the family of the Ezekiel Gumezi right there. We're going to try and name the bill after him, and it's going to save lives in the future. Renters Alliance also set up a fund and raised $40,000 to help the young mother and her family after Ezekiel died from that tragic fall. So thank you for doing that and working with the city of Tacoma Park and the whole community to support that family. But that's the sort of thing that should have never happened. We can't change the past, but we should continue to work together to make sure no toddlers ever die or get injured from falling out of a window. That's the simplest thing in the world, and I'm glad we were able to work together to pass that bill. All of our residents need to be safe in their homes. They have a right to good, safe, affordable housing, and we have a responsibility as legislators to do everything we can do to ensure that. This is the type of legislation that can save lives. We're going to continue as we come out of the pandemic to make sure our DHCA is getting back into buildings and inspecting them for the mold and the other housing code violations that we've worked together on in the past. A lot of those inspections dropped off, and they need to resume now because everybody has the right to safe and affordable housing. So I am grateful to you for all your partnership in the past. I'm really looking forward to continue to work with you as we come out of this to create an even better environment for renters in the future. Thank you.
Tom, since I'm good at interrupting, let me just interrupt my board chair, William Roberts, to remind you that we like to give credit where credit is due. And since it's going to hit 90 degrees this week, did you want to mention any other legislation?
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, Matt. Thank you to the Renters Alliance and many others on the call here, DHCA, for helping pass the bill we passed last year to require landlords to provide working air conditioning to all the renters, the 300,000 renters in Montgomery County. That is highly important legislation. There's only a few other jurisdictions that had it. There's other jurisdictions that have been calling our office to get a copy of it so they can pass it. But it's going to save lives as well. We've had too many tenants that you know at the Charter House and other properties that have either died or been taken to the hospital because they are living in overheated apartments where the air conditioning has failed. So I was grateful to be able to work with all of you and the county exec and his staff to get that passed. And please, if your air conditioning is failing, this is the time to call the county and tell us so that Director Nagam can send folks over there to work with the landlord and get that fixed before it gets really hot. The hot weather is starting early this year. The next 2 weeks are expected to be very hot. This is the time to check on your air conditioning and get in touch with us if it's not working. Thank you.
Totally. Thank you so much, Council President Hucker, and really appreciate sharing that. I'm actually going to flip it back to Matt because I'm not sure how long you'll be able to be with us, but we have a couple of tenants that are going to share a window into sort of what folks are going through rather, and then we're going to open it up to some of the great questions that we have in the chat and in the Q&A. So please keep those coming, folks. But Matt, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Tom Hucker and County Executive Ulrich. Tom, we understand we don't want you to in any way not have enough time for the budgeting. So if you have to bail, this is being recorded and you can listen later. But if you're able to do several things at once, which we know you are, let me turn to our first tenant, which is Wayne Collins, who lives in Bethesda. Wayne, what's going on with you? Tell us your concern and your question. You have to turn off your mute.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Wayne Collins. I'm a renter in Bethesda. My concerns centered on what I consider to be extremely important matter is the qualifications of the property management. And recently, my apartment community, and I use that community loosely, was taken over by yet another property management company. The property management staff has failed to manage their books accurately, have not been responsive regarding basic maintenance in our community or in my apartment. I have had broken appliances that has taken months to fix. I have hot water that has taken longer and longer to be effective. The management also has been rude, very disrespectful, threatening when I requested help. And it's only when I engage the Renters Alliance, through Matt, of course, who reached out to the regional property management and informed them of their obligation as well as the laws. Did they do any sort of response? And there is still some ongoing confusion and difficulty with the management in getting annual income certification paperwork accomplished. Property managers and the landlords, in my opinion, need to know the laws and best practices to manage the homes of thousands of renters in the county. And I'm looking at this and going over, and I'm asking, can the county create a program that requires property staff and landlords to be trained and certified as a condition for having a renter's license? We have to get a driver's license in order to drive an automobile. And how can we allow property managers to run rental communities of thousands of homes and yet not know what they're doing? I think this is very important, that we need to get this problem solved, because we have property managers who are not in any way up to the laws of Montgomery County or the state. Thank you.
Wayne. County Executive or County Council President, would you like to address that?
So I thought there was training, but if there's not, I don't see any problem requiring it. Tacoma Park actually required landlord training. They had to go through and submit to some training so they understood what the laws were. And so I will look at this, or Frank or Asim can tell me whether we have anything like that or not. If we don't, I'd be happy to send something over to the council that would require, that we create a program and that the landlords, go through a training process. I agree with you, particularly, companies come in who haven't managed the property here before. They don't understand the laws, and they're thinking they're evicting people. They're not giving notice to people. So I think it's a good issue you raise.
Thank you.
Mr. Hucker?
No, I fully agree. Nothing to
That's
add.
easy. Boy, if we keep going like this, we might actually accomplish something tonight.
Very good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins. Pat Beckham, a renter in downtown Silver Spring. Pat?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am a retired senior, and my concern is centered around rent income increases every year. And I was wondering if somehow could I guess it must be legal, but people like myself, and I'm a retired registered nurse, you know, you move, I do understand they have a right to increase your rent, but you know, even if I decided to move to a smaller apartment in my building where I'm renting now, I would still be with the rent going up every year like everyone's is. Is there any way we can, the county or someone could help with putting a cap on rent increases every year? Not only, you know, you have to deal with the rent increase, but you have other activities in the building, or you know, like parking goes up every year. If you have storage, that seems like it goes up every year. So I was just wondering if someone could help the retired seniors in terms of holding down rent increases.
So I'll take this one. You know, Will Jawando introduced the bill on rent stabilization. He asked me not to do it. He said he wanted to introduce it. I think we need rent stabilization. We are going to continue to lose affordable housing, and we're going to continue to drive tenants into more and more difficult situations. I've got 20,000 people who make 30% of AMI, which is about $32,000, who are paying 50 to 60% of their income for rent,
Yeah.
which is outrageous. The planning board, which has no interest in rent stabilization, and its chair, who despises rent stabilization, actually had a consultant report that recommended rent stabilization. And their own report says that the county stands to lose about another 11,000 affordable units over by 2030. So I personally think people have their head in the sand, and that we will basically wind up displacing it. We'll have what happened in Arlington, where Arlington lost almost all of its, I mean, almost all. I'm not exaggerating. It was a great story about this. Almost all of their affordable housing to rent increases. Affordable housing doesn't disappear. Affordable housing simply becomes unaffordable. And if we're not willing to do this, then, you know, it's kind of hard to say for affordable housing is a crisis and we have to protect people if you're not willing to protect people. We've got the authority to do it. We've got the legal right to do it. I don't get it.
County Executive, one of the confusions that's out there is the difference between what people mean by affordable housing. The Renters Alliance has never got a particular dog in the fight as to whether we should build housing or not. That's a whole other public policy issue that you and others like to champion and discuss. For our issue, it is how do you preserve and protect the existing population that lives in the housing now, so that, as you say, their housing remains affordable, that their rents and costs remain predictable. And I know from Ms. Beckham's situation, who is not just any old nurse, she's a highly experienced operating room and SEIS, highly experienced nurse, I know. And I have a lot of respect for nurses, having worked my way through an emergency room through college. But preserving the existing population and rents for people who are on fixed incomes is a very different public policy issue from building more housing with a percentage being at area median income.
So I don't think, I honestly don't think you can separate these two things. Because if I don't build more affordable housing, and actually really affordable housing for the same people you're trying to protect, the numbers we got, and these, again, these aren't my numbers. These came from parking planning and UI and all kinds of people who I had nothing to do with, never consulted with. Their report says that 1/2 to 3/4 of the people coming here over the next 10 to 20 years will require a subsidy. And of course, nobody's going to build affordable housing when only 1/4 of the housing is at market. And then you're supposed to figure out how you're going to subsidize 3/4 of the rest of the housing. So you are intimately tied into this, because if people come here, they will just increase the competition for the housing units that are available. And that will drive rents up with no cap on rents. it'll just get higher. The county, and I think you're going to hear more about this soon, we intervened over in Halpine on Twin Brook Parkway. We owned a piece of property, very little piece of property amidst what was going to be a very large development. We basically were able to achieve no net loss of affordable housing by the conditions we put on what it would take to get us to part with our piece of property. And we are looking to make that a model, because if I don't require no net loss of housing, if somebody tears down a bunch of affordable units, all they've got to do is put up 12.5 to 15% new units. You could take all those apartments along Twin Brook Parkway and meet the county's normal requirements for 15% or 12.5% affordability and wipe out hundreds of units that exist today. So we are working on this. We were successful in this negotiation. We're doing a development on Bushy Drive near Randolph Road and Veers Mill Road. That project is almost entirely affordable, and I mean entirely be affordable. And it is not a bunch of 1-bedroom apartments. It has 2 and 3-bedroom apartments. It even has some tenant ownership in it. So it's an effort to try to bring some balance into what we're doing. And we've also told all the nonprofits, here are our parking lots and garages. Make us proposals. If you want to build on them, build on them. Build affordable housing for us. So I hear what you're saying, but this other fight is this is all tied together. These strings pull on each other.
Well, for us, it's as you know, there is an eviction crisis going on that's immediate, and then there's a slow motion eviction crisis going on with people who are increasingly seeing their incomes go to rent to the point where they're going to have to move, and an increasing number of them are seniors and people on fixed income. But in the interest of time, and to rescue you a little bit, County Executive, we have to go on to our third tenant, who also has an important issue. Carol McSween Brooks, what's your concern and question?
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to communicate with County Executive Elrich and also Council President Hucker again. I followed both your campaigns closely in 2018. My name is Carol McSween Brooks, and I currently live in the Aspen Hill area of Silver Spring. And I want to just briefly bring to the table an experience I had in filing a landlord tenant complaint. When I moved from Kensington to Silver Spring in October 2020 last year, I tried to retrieve my security deposit of more than $1,500 from my landlord. And to ensure that I followed the requirements of terminating a tenancy and prepared for any objections from my landlord, I studied Maryland law regarding security deposits, and I demanded a walkthrough, which was videotaped and photographed. After repeated attempts urging my landlord to return the security deposit, and after she failed to provide me with the required list of any alleged damages and costs that were to be deducted from the deposit within 45 days of my move-out date, which she admits she did not do, the landlord failed to return my deposit. So working with the Renters Alliance, I filed a complaint with the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs in December of 2020. The investigation of my complaint went back and forth, but months later, I had still not received my security deposit plus the required interest. So I became quite annoyed and, let's say, a little bit angry with the process, as the resolution of my complaint was based on a specific point of law. And when the landlord subsequently relented and said she was going to send a check more than 4 months after I initially filed the complaint, it was for the wrong amount. So I then demanded that I receive a hearing on my case with the Commission of Landlord Tenant Affairs. And for my hearing, I asked that I not only receive my security deposit, but damages for the delays and obfuscation that the landlord threw into the process. So my 5-hour hearing was held earlier this month, replete with me and my witnesses facing the landlord and her attorney and 4 commission members. And I'm awaiting the decision, which I was told would be provided within 45 days of that 5-hour hearing. The thing that I wanted to say about this is I can't imagine how frightening and off-putting this process would be for the average renter, especially seniors, residents with low or limited incomes, or immigrants, or anyone without the wherewithal to take on this lengthy, intimidating, and exhausting fight like I did. So my question I asked, why does the landlord-tenant complaint process take so long when renters like me, who are just trying to make a home in Montgomery County, must wait for months to get decisions on important matters, from money to securing our stable, quality homes? Is there any plan to improve the process and change the mission of OLTA from endless mediation to quick enforcement when the law is broken?
Our goal is mediation. We try to settle it. If we cannot settle it, then we send it to the commission. And I'm sorry, you filed in December. It was presented in April and you had your hearing in May. So that was a 4 months. That's not terrible. We only have 6 investigators and we get about 700 complaints per year. So we're moving as fast as we can. And some things settle quicker than others. It depends on the parties. Some people can settle a complaint in a week. And some people just drag stuff on and on and on. Some landlords are unresponsive and some tenants are just, they won't respond. So it kind of depends. It depends on the parties, and sometimes the investigator is not moving as fast as they can. So I admit that sometimes the process is slower than it should be, but we are doing the best we can with what we have.
I am quite sure you're doing the best you can, since I work with Rosie all the time and I know there's good people there. But I do think this is a question of system and structure, which, with no disrespect to Rosie McRae Moody, may be in the county executives and Asim Nagam's and Frank Demarays and the county council's portfolio. Executive Elrich or Asim or Frank, or would any of you all care to talk about something that we've brought up numerous times over the years about improving efficiency in government generally, but specifically at DHCA?
I mean, let me just chime in a little bit. I mean, we're always looking for efficiencies. It's unfortunate that, Ms. Carroll had to go through this kind of delayed process, but at the same time, in order to be fair to everyone, to all of the parties involved, we do have to look at the facts of the case. And sometimes, yes, there is back and forth, but we try to move as fast as we can, given the system that we have to, we don't just make decisions after listening to one party. We have to listen to all the parties and look at the facts, do our own evaluation, present it to the commission if need be, and then move forward. And more than likely, we are able to mediate the matters to everyone's satisfaction. Sometimes, we are not able to be very successful, it's true, but at the same time, in a lot of cases, we are being very successful. But at the same time, we're always looking for efficiencies, how to make our process better for our constituents. So we'll keep on looking at those opportunities.
County Executive, do you want to weigh in on this one?
Look, I'm much in favor of figuring out how to do this a little bit more efficiently. Unfortunately, we don't have a simple hearing examiner process where you can bring people in quickly and dispose of it. And anytime lawyers get involved, they tend to mess the thing up. I'm not, I'll just be honest with you. I'm not much into mediation. I'm into finding what's true and what's not, and then administering accordingly. I'm not interested in taking somebody's rights and mediating an agreement where the person who violates rights is happy with the settlement that lets them get away with something, but maybe not everything. So, mediation was never my favorite thing. I really, wish we had a system that was more like an administrative hearing. But I do like Ulta processes in general, and I think they serve people pretty well when they can be brought in front of Ulta in a timely manner. And I think Rosie's right; it was pretty good. If you got the court in a month, and got this whole thing done in 4 months, that is not the worst experience I ever heard of. And I come out at Tacoma Park saying, I thought we had a pretty good process. Even that process could wind up taking a few months to get through.
But we're looking forward to an opportunity to meet with you and your key staff, county executive, and with Asim, and of course with Rosie and our friends at Ulta to review this. It is something that has been a priority for us for a while. Obviously, nobody cares about when things work. We care about when it doesn't work. And unfortunately, when things don't work, sometimes it has a wider chilling effect on people you don't hear from because they don't avail themselves of the process because of stories like Ms. Carol McSween Brooks. So thank you, Carol, very much for that. Chris Perry, you were going to mention something else and ask, I believe, about the status of a program.
Yeah, this is to County Executive Elrich and to Council President Hucker. What's the status of the troubled properties program that started out so energetically? What's going on now?
I'll leave that to Asim or Frank.
Do you want to chime in? During the pandemic situation, we had to, scale back on our normal operations. So we were not doing the inspections that we were doing pre-pandemic. That being said, as the situation is getting better, we hope to start our regular inspections soon. Of course, we have to run it by the unions, get the nod from them. But we expect to start our troubled properties inspections soon, now that the county has achieved some kind of a normalcy in terms of vaccination. So we know that, earlier we were doing 100% of the units inspection for troubled properties, which were put kind of in abeyance because of pandemic. So hopefully we'll get back into the rhythm of the things. And there is a backlog of inspections, I must say that. It will take us some time to catch up on things, so please be patient. Our inspectors will work as fast as they can to get things, up to the speed where they should be.
I think, Chris, I think you've got to give some forbearance to the county on this one. I mean, it is not safe and was absolutely unsafe to go into apartment buildings that had the highest incidence of COVID and expect inspectors to go in there. If you remember, and you probably don't because you didn't have to deal with this, but in the beginning, the masks we gave people weren't even N95s. They were pieces of crap cloth, but they were better than nothing. And so we've dealt with this. We've got masks now. The county is going back to normal, more normal on May 28th, actually. We expect the governor will lift the state of emergency, which governs a lot of the regulations with our employees, probably by the end of June, if not the end of May. And then things will further return to normal. But when we go back, we'll get these inspections done and bring these units into compliance. But I really felt bad, sending people out door to door. I couldn't do that to people, not now. Or at least
I don't think anybody disagrees with the idea of putting county staff or anybody in danger. But unfortunately, we have heard an increasing number of horror stories of buildings that are seeing neglect. And I think in some cases, we're seeing property management and landlords take advantage of the COVID excuse not to take care of repairs that they would do otherwise. But perhaps Dan McHugh at Code Enforcement could give us a little operational update in light of the opening of the county and the improvement of the conditions for code enforcement.
Yeah, Matt, before we get on with that, this is Chris Perry again. I fully appreciate that the safety of county employees is paramount. and should never be sacrificed for any reason. However, I am curious about Director Nizam. Have you established some priorities about which properties will get inspected first, with the idea of looking at properties that were going into the pandemic a problem while others were not?
And that could be
Yeah.
for Asim or Dan.
Yeah, well, I will let Dan chime in a second, but just to answer your question, of course, if it's a troubled properties, those are priorities, and we inspect 100% of those units. If it's a property which is at risk or compliant, then there are different cycle, and we may inspect, a portion of those units in those buildings. That being said, we are putting together a plan to move forward on our inspection process. And I will have Dan chime in on this now. Dan, could you please chime in?
Yeah, thank you. Safety is number one across the board. It's not just for the county employees that are going to these units, it's also for the property management company, the maintenance crews, and everything else going in. I know a lot of the properties, they were going in for emergency type of situations, to make repairs and such. That was kind of where we were at as well. If there was a health and safety violation, we would go in and do an inspection, physical inspection. If not, we would do a video chat or accept pictures, photos, etc., and move the case along, based on a notice of violation. We do have a backlog. We are going to start where we left off on the troubled properties to complete the troubled properties. Within the next few months, once we start getting back up and running. I think we have about 75 or so ish complexes to complete the process, but we'll get back in, we'll do the inspections. We're also going to have to keep in mind as well is not everybody's going to want us in the unit. So we're going to have to take that into consideration as well, upon doing these inspections. So it may not be a complete 100%, but it will be pretty close, and we'll be working with the tenants and the property managers to get back in and get this moving as quick as we can. We're hoping within the next couple of months, but we do have to work things out with our unions and staff to bring them back up to speed. So I'll leave it at that.
Dan, will there be a publicly published list of the top troubled properties?
When we get finished with the complete troubled property list, that will be published at that time, and then we'll do a review based on what the numbers were, because they're going to fluctuate as properties go on, come off, and so forth. So we will be publishing that as we complete everything. We'll reassess it, and then we'll make that public and move on to the next phase of troubled properties.
Well, fantastic. And Matt, you can stop me if I'm wrong, but I think as folks know, for these town halls, we like to do 2 phases. So it seems like we're about to shift to our second phase and talk a little bit more about some of the county programs and how folks can access them and be able to answer some of these questions. Thank you, Alana, and others who've been in the chat answering some of these questions. But before we do that, just want to again thank our renters who sent some questions in and engaged in the dialogue. Council President Hucker certainly, and County Executive Mark Elrich for being with us and engaging in the conversation and pointing in some directions of where we really need to be pushing and thinking outside of the box about what we need to do for tenants as we get through the remission phase. I think is how you coined it, Mark, which I appreciate hearing that more than the COVID recovery, because so many people are not recovered, and not just from the health aspect, but from the economic fallout and all this other stuff. And so as we're getting through the remission phase, I'm going to start saying that. Look forward to continuing to partner with you and Director Nagam and Frank and all Rosie and everybody else. So thanks so much.
Yeah, I'll just say that at this point in time, my schedule is a little better than it's been. All I've done for 15 months basically is eat, sleep, and breathe COVID. And 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 like every day, it's like you don't know what what next bomb's going to drop or where you have to pivot to. So we're in a place now where I have a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. I'm not getting daily briefings on the amount of virus in the community because it's fallen to levels that are and all these little things buy me a little extra time every day. So if we need to put together a meeting, I'm happy to to do that and talk about some of these issues. You raised some good points. Some are easy to do and they have low dollar cost, and we could do pretty simply. And some, we're going to have to ponder how we do this. You do realize we're at the end of the budget cycle, so whatever Tom and gang do tomorrow is what we're going to be working with for the next year. So it may forego some things, but it give us ideas about some things we can build into the next budget. And thank you for your kind of tireless devotion to working with tenants. And I just close by saying I think all the fights related to affordable housing are your fights. And you, like I said to Matt earlier, you can't neatly separate this stuff because what's available ultimately affects the people who are here, and what I do, how we revitalize a community often means displacing people. I mean, all these things come together. And so we need policies that are a bit more comprehensive. But and hopefully at some point we'll be able to talk about rent control in the council seriously.
Well, Mark, we have we're good elephants, and we do not forget.
Yes.
And we will, and thank you, William Roberts, our chair, for his devotion and leadership, not only heading the Citizens Advisory Board in his region up in the Germantown, have I got it right? Clarksville?
Germantown, Clarksburg, the entire up county, Matt. You need to know these communities. We met, no, and joking for, but yeah.
No, I had COVID. I had COVID fog. Okay. But I got my shots, so I'm better. But County Executive Elbert, seriously, we will come back around, and we will pursue, as much as we'd like to see you rested, we can't let you rest when so many tenants are facing some serious issues. We'd like to meet with you and your staff to talk about making this government more efficient for renters and policies that could increase the stability and quality and affordability of rental housing in the county. I think, I know William Roberts didn't mention it, but he's a big champion of holistic view of policy in this regard. But I've been at this so long, I tend to have a bias towards the people who are currently living here who are unstable. But I'm open-minded. So let's approach it.
I'll just say, look at what happened in Arlington, and they were perfectly stable and had a boatload of affordable housing, and policies that had nothing to do with rent evaporated their housing. So beware.
Indeed. All right. Thank you.
Talk to you all later.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to talk to you.
Bye.
This evening.
Thank you, Asim. And we'll keep Frank. Will Roberts, I understand you have a 3-year-old who needs your attention.
I do have a 3-year-old that needs my attention, so I have to go and help put her to bed. I will say, in case people, we were joking, but just so folks know, to put a finer point in, the Renters Alliance is a countywide organization, and so we do work in properties up county and down county also. So I was giving Matt a little poke there about up county, but don't want people to take things the wrong way. But yes, I need to go put this kiddo to bed. So thank you all. It's been really good to be with you and continue the conversation.
Thank you, William Roberts. So we are not done. We know that there are many renters out there who have specific questions about the rent relief program, about code enforcement issues, about renters' rights. And so I'll now turn to the Deputy Director for Housing, Frank Demaray, to give a little overview and introduce the key people with HHS and DHCA.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And hopefully we can answer a number of the questions with some of the summaries you're about to hear. You'll be hearing from Alana Branda from the Department of Health and Human Services. The rental assistance program is available, open. Applications are being received, they're being processed. She'll speak to you about eligibility and process, but it's critical to share that with everyone who might have any kind of delinquency in rent. Rosie McRae Moody will speak to the landlord-tenant side of the issue of trying to avoid and defer eviction actions. You do have some protections. There is no moratorium. There are protections that get called a moratorium. There are a number of things that anyone on this call who has received a court notice or court date will speak to that. But the critical element there is to attend the court hearing. There is legal assistance available at court. There are protections available to you by attending court. And the report is that over 90% of the tenants who attend their court date do get relief. In many cases, it is a deferral of any action, but it can buy time for you to make application and to start receiving rental assistance and working with your landlord with the rental assistance. So I think Alana's going to be able to answer many of the questions concerning that program. So why don't I say welcome, Alana, and please update folks on what they need to know.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank. So good evening, everyone. I've tried to answer a couple of the questions in the chat and Q&A, but we'll verbally try to cover most of it. I've been following what people have asking. So I think the most critical thing to know is the COVID rent relief program is open, is accepting applications. As Council President Hooker mentioned, it is up to $12,000 of assistance for families or households that have been impacted by COVID. So it does need to be a COVID impact from a member of the household. The application is an online application. If you either have any barrier that prevents you from completing that online application yourself, you can call 311 and we will have a member from the HHS team get back to you to help you complete that application. But otherwise, the application is online. I do want to emphasize that with this round 3 that opened April 14th, it is a new application system. We tried to be responsive to a lot of the challenges and concerns that we heard from the previous rounds, and we did unveil a completely new application portal. So if you have applied previously, if you were on the wait list, if you got money previously, but are still in need of additional funds, please apply again. We cannot process grants off of the wait list. We cannot process additional grants off of a previous application. So we do need you to apply again. There is a part of the application that is for you as a renter, and for anyone who is on the phone here, on the call here as a landlord. There is also a companion part of the application that we ask the landlords to complete. Both parts of the application are found at the same website. You click start a new application for both of them, and just the very first question you'll be asked, are you a renter or are you a landlord? And it will take you in the right direction then for completing that application. It will really help us with both sides do it. It just helps us move that application along quicker. I will note that there is a number of documentation that is needed for the application. On the website, there's actually a documentation checklist, so you can make sure you have everything ready to go. If for any reason you don't have anything right that day, or you are struggling to upload it into the system, please just make sure as soon as our caseworker reaches out to you that you will have all those materials ready for you. I just want to confirm, so again, it's up to $12,000 per household for rent relief. At this point, we are not able to provide additional assistance through the COVID rent relief program for other expenses beyond your core rent. But I do want to make sure that you are aware of, we do have our Office of Home Energy programs. So if you are you get a shutoff notice for your heating or your electric, or if you feel you may just be income eligible for some credits to your account, I do encourage you to please apply for our Office of Home Energy Assistance programs. The other thing I want to mention, going back to COVID rent relief, is it is available whether you are currently under a lease, whether your lease has expired and you are on month to month, whether you are in an informal lease situation. Anyone who has a rent obligation in Montgomery County is eligible to apply. The eligibility also calls for households whose income is below 50% of the area median income. That can be either from your 2020 taxable income or your tax return information, or it can be from the previous 30 days. So you can report it from either place, and that you have been a resident in Montgomery County since at least August of 2020. I know many people, the timing is not going to be perfect. People are having hearings at court or other eviction actions or receiving late notices and threats of eviction from your landlord, please do know that we are trying to get through the applications as quickly as possible. We do have to review every single application. We have to make sure it meets all of the terms and conditions that it must meet in order to use this treasury money that we are using for this. So it does take a little bit of time for us to do that. We have more than doubled our staff, and they are working. I can tell you we are all emailing each other sometimes at 1 a.m. on the weekends. We are working around the clock to get those applications processed as quickly as we can. So I know it's not a lot of comfort when you're the one who has to show up to court and you have not had resolution to your case yet. But please do bear with us as we try to work through them. If you do hear from one of our caseworkers, please be as responsive as you're able to in terms of any documentation that they still need, or any clarification or questions that they might have, so that we can try to move those along as quickly as possible.
Lana, a specific
yes.
question. The previous program ended when, and people who apply to that program should apply to the new program on what dates? When did one end and when did the next one begin?
Yeah, the last applications we received for round 2 was on December 2nd. So anyone who you would have put yourself on the wait list after December 2nd, it was very basic information, your name, address, phone number. I think it had how much rent you owed. If that was the only part of the form you did, or if you called 311 on December 2nd or after, then you need to do a full application. And that opened April 14th. I will though reiterate though that even if you received funds from round 1 or round 2, if you continue to have an inability to pay your rent, you continue to be behind on rent because of COVID, you can apply for round 3 again. So even if you did already apply previously and received funding, if you are still experiencing a COVID financial impact and are behind on your rent, you are eligible to apply again.
And the average amount that would, if you receive 4,000, you'd still be eligible for 8,000 in additional funds. But if you've received up to 12,000, would you still be eligible?
Well, you could only have received 4,000. That was the maximum that we were giving out previously. So the household cap is 12,000. So if you did previously receive anywhere from 1 to 4,000 from our previous round 1 or round 2, that would be deducted from the total amount that you could be receiving at this point. But again, we encourage you to apply even if you owe more, because we can have that conversation with you. The caseworker can have that conversation and look to see if there are other resources that we might be able to bring to the table to assist you.
These funds, Alana, also not only do they cover the rent that is in arrears, but can potentially be prospective.
Yes, they can potentially be prospective also. And the other thing that I think is really important to note is that there may be some of you here or colleagues, friends that you know who have identified that with the new financial reality they find themselves in, that the housing that you're in now is not long-term sustainable. And if you have had that COVID impact, we can use these funds to also help you with security deposit and the first 3 months of rent at a new place that may be more long-term sustainable for you. So again, apply, let's have that conversation. And we can, help identify the best path for you. So again, I just ask for your patience as we work to process through as many of these applications as we can, as quickly as we can. So I will pause there. And I know Frank, I think, is going to talk more about the legal assistance. If our timing is not working and you do find yourself with a court date, he can address that.
Ilana, I don't know if I heard you because I got momentarily distracted, but we should probably also address the common question of how long is the turnaround time from application to receive a check, and also some improvements in the program this time with regard to tenants receiving notification that their application has been received. And of course, they should use that notification if they're going to court.
Sure. So I'm going to start backwards. So as Matt mentioned, when you go to start a new application, you will end up setting up for yourself a login to access the full application. Please note it is a two-part, so you're doing a pre-eligibility survey, and then it will ask you to register for an account, and you must complete the full application. We will not be able to provide any assistance off of just completing a pre-eligibility survey. Once you complete that full application, you will be able to log in and see on your dashboard a status update of where your case is. They are, that we've received it, that we're working to match it with your landlord application or with tenant, depending on who initiated the application, that it is under initial review and waiting for caseworker assignment, that it's with a caseworker. You may see that we are waiting additional documentation. You will get an email if you provided your email address that lets you have that confirmation that your application was received. And you can also always take a screenshot or bring up on any mobile device, log into your account, and you would be able to show at court the status of your application. In terms of timing, there is a number of prioritization criteria that we need to use in terms of assigning cases. That includes if a member of the household has been unemployed for 90 days or more, whether there is an active eviction reported with the household application, and whether the household is living in one of our high impact areas. The county executive had mentioned some of our equity framework before. And so that is what is identifying these high impact areas. So those cases are prioritized for processing. And so unfortunately, we cannot give an exact time frame of when any given case will be picked up, because it does have an impact on whether it meets that prioritization and how many cases with prioritizing criteria are in the queue versus cases without. So unfortunately, we cannot give an exact answer to that question. So again, we ask for your patience. Once you hear from a caseworker, there are cases that we are putting in the queue for releasing checks in 3 or 4 days. If the landlord has done their part, if you've done your part and uploaded all your documentation, if everything is there, that case is going to move really quickly. If the landlord has not completed their application, we are actually required by the Treasury Department to give them at least minimum of 10 days to respond to requests to complete an application. So that's going to just extend the length of time between when a caseworker starts working on a case before they can actually recommend for a check to be issued.
A couple of pieces of bad questions coming in now, which are important. One, Ilana, if you could address the issue of whether or not, if a check is sent to the landlord is required to inform the tenant that they've received it. And the other question is, if the landlord received benefit from the last program or this program, what are the requirements of the landlord in terms of not evicting?
Okay, so if a grant is being awarded, the landlord will receive a confirmation that this amount of money is being given to pay rental as a rent credit for this specific individual living at this specific address, and will reiterate the terms of that. The recipient will also receive a letter notifying that this payment is being made on your behalf, and these are the conditions of the payment. So both parties will receive notification that a check is going out, who that check is being made out to, where that check is being issued to, and what are the terms of receiving those funds. And I will reiterate, it will be very specific that is for rent. So it is not for legal fees, it is not for late fees, it is not for parking, amenities, any of those other things. It is towards your core rent balance. And that leads into Matt's second question in terms of a landlord. It is required that they forgive any and all legal fees, late fees, and penalties that have been accrued since March 13th of 2020. We can only go back as far as COVID. So again, it's since March 13th of 2020. Any eviction actions currently in process must be canceled. So that includes a filing, if there is already a writ and they are scheduling that eviction. At any stage in the process, any eviction actions must be canceled, and no new eviction actions can be initiated until a minimum of 30 days after the assistance period is ended. So if we provide prospective rent, that 30-day clock kicks in on the last day that we have covered or contributed towards any of the rent payment. For the evictions, I will note that The only evictions that are allowed is if there is a breach of lease due to safety issues. The landlord is able to file that, but it does prevent them from filing tenant holding over during that same, again, anytime we're providing assistance and for 30 days after that. If you have an expired lease or a lease that is expiring during this time, they are required to offer you a 90-day renewal for that lease. It is up to you whether you accept that 90-day renewal and sign off on it, but they do need to offer that. And I want to make very clear that this is just for COVID rent relief round 3. So if you receive the 4,000 from round 1 or round 2, unfortunately, none of these landlord concessions were obligations at that point. They are just for those applications that have come in since April 14th and that we are processing now.
I want to, we may have a technical glitch here, but I do want to welcome one of our board members who has been quite a champion in Annapolis on rental housing issues, Delegate Janelle Wilkins. Can you hear us, Delegate Wilkins?
Yes, I can hear you. I don't see a button to turn my camera on, so I don't know if you all can see me, but I wanted to.
Well, you look great.
Oh, okay. I want to jump on to say hello to everyone, and also to mention that we worked on a number of bills this legislative session related to rent relief. Unfortunately, several of them fell short. However, I think that I want everyone to know that you are not alone, to engage your legislators and make it known that
It may be working now. Try again.
so that there we go. So that we're able to come back stronger in the next legislative session and make the case for further rent relief and further actions to help ensure protections for renters. So I really just wanted to lift up the need to continue to engage elected officials, because we still need many changes in this area. So really glad that everyone was able to join, and we will continue the fight to ensure that everyone has a safe, affordable, and stable place to live.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Thanks for saying hello. We know you're busy. You're going from one meeting to the next. It seems everybody's particularly busy, especially if you're in the renters' rights world. So thank you very much. Getting back to the rent relief program. Lorraine Driscoll, are you monitoring the chat as well? Do we have any other questions for Alana Branda?
Yes. There's a number about help with rent assistance. I think Lana addressed how long to wait. They're moving as quickly as they can. But what do you recommend if someone, different people have mentioned, one said they have a court date, one said they have a writ. What do people in those situations, what do you recommend?
So as I mentioned, we are prioritizing applications that do have active eviction actions or pending eviction actions. And so we are working to get through those as quickly as we can. But as was mentioned before, there are unfortunately a lot of cases being heard now, and evictions currently in different stages of processing. So, you know, we are trying to get to them as quickly as possible. But please, if you do find yourself with the judgment, if you find yourself receiving a red and white notice from the sheriff's office, it's called a red and white because it's literally a kind of white flyer with big red text on it letting you know the sheriff may be coming any day. If you are at that point, please, please, please call 311, let them know you are being evicted, and one of our team members will call you back. So in case we had not been able to expedite that application, we will be able to expedite it at that point. As I noted, unfortunately, we may not be able to process all applications before a hearing date. So as I know Frank's going to talk about more, if you have a hearing, show up to court. That is the best thing you can do for yourself. That is the best protection you can afford yourself at this point. Bring the documentation that you have applied for the rent relief program. It goes a long way to showing that you are trying to obtain any assistance that you may be available. So bring that proof that you have applied, but please do show up to court. And maybe, I don't know if Frank, you want to say more at this point.
think you're touching on the critical element. It's important to buy as much time as possible. Anyone with a court date, Alana just spoke to it, you contact the county with 311. We're posting in the chat. You know, it's critical to talk to legal assistance ahead of time to prepare. I'll have Rosie McCray Moody talk a little bit about some of the overall, but absolutely anyone with a court date has to prepare, has to attend, and will receive in almost all cases at least a reprieve that buys time, provides time for your rental assistance application to work through, and provides an approach and money that you can then work with your landlord on to bring current and to work on how you can maintain your housing. But the critical thing is there is no moratorium. You have to attend court. Judgment will be issued if you don't, and then you will be struggling to try and maintain your housing at that point with a much shorter window. Anyway.
Well, let me add a bookend to that, Frank. Of course, you need to go to court. Do not allow yourself to miss that date. But the Renters Alliance and other partners are here to help. If you have any confusion now, if you think that you're going to be facing eviction, if you think that you're going to be behind in your rent, if you've received a notice from your landlord saying you have to leave in a certain amount of time and you're not sure what to do, email us at info@rentersalliance.org. We're here to help. We will, if I don't call you, somebody will call you from the Renters Alliance. We will guide you to HHS through the Rental Assistance Program, through the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs. For code enforcement issues, we'll guide you to how to pursue that kind of complaint. We're here to answer those questions. Don't stew. Don't avoid these problems. It's your housing, and we are created to fill that gap. So utilize us. We're here to help. Don't let it become the day that you're in court that you learn about your rights. Find out what you need to do as early as possible. Frank, what else?
Well, I would like to just have Rosie McCray Moody reintroduce herself and cover a few of the key things that are protections and issues that you need to know about, especially during the COVID period.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Rosie McCray Moody, Manager, Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs. Right now, legislation was passed by the County Council so that rents cannot increase more than the voluntary rent guideline. So if you get a notice of rent increase on or after February 5th, 2021, your rent increase cannot be more than 1.4%. If you're offered a 2-year lease, the increase for that second year cannot be more than 1.4%. If you go month to month, your rent can't be increased more than 1.4%. And if you are renewing, you must be offered a 2-year lease, or your landlord has to give you a written explanation as to why not. And if he doesn't do it, please call 311, ask for the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, file a complaint, because that's illegal. They have to offer you a 2-year lease or give you a written notice as to why it's not being offered, because you can challenge that notice if you don't, and we can challenge that notice if we don't think it's sufficient. So that's important. And again, we're gonna beat the dead horse, go to court. Because if you do not go, you lose automatically. And so you're just digging a hole for yourself. Legal aid is in court every day to help you. So they're sitting there, they're on the courthouse, they're literally on the courthouse steps to help you maneuver the process. So go, take whatever documentation you have and go to court. If you think you're eligible or whether or not apply for all the programs that are out there, apply for rental assistance. Because if you don't ask, you won't get anything. And this is your housing, as everybody keeps saying. So do all you can to get what you're entitled to.
I want to point out that in the last 2 weeks, we've seen over 4,000 filings for eviction in Montgomery County courts. Now, many of them were dismissed because either tenants have caught up or they've received rental assistance, or they were able to put forth a defense based on the CDC order or the governor's order right now. But troublingly, there's dozens of scores of tenants who are not showing up to court. And when they don't show up to court, they get a judgment against them. That's you're guilty. And the judge is deciding that you are going to be evicted. So you might have a defense, you might have alternatives, but if you don't show up, automatically you're guilty. So reach out to us to help early, and for God's sakes, go to court.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, we keep speaking about the defenses and the moratoriums, et cetera. There is a federal, they call it the CDC, Center for Disease Control order that allows you as a tenant to sign a declaration. The form is available at the DHC website. We put in the chat a number of times. You can get to information about this at Montgomery County MD.gov, the main county website, with a /renters. And the form is called a declaration. If you believe you're eligible because you had income loss and there are conditions there that you certify and declare, you don't have to show any documents. You simply have to present this declaration. And you can present it to your landlord, signed by all the tenants on the lease, and you can show up in court and present it again there. And the lawyers that are there will have copies, but to bring a copy of it, the judge will give a reservation of your judgment until the order expires. The newspaper said a federal judge in the District of Columbia had declared it no longer valid. That has been appealed, and every indication that this protection will be available through its current expiration, which is end of June. So anyone with court dates in May and June should be exercising that. There's also protections. The governor of Maryland has a order that you cannot be evicted if you can demonstrate to the judge with documents that you've lost income from COVID. And that's a higher documentation standard, but it's available and could extend past June 30. We don't know what the governor's going to do with his state of emergency. So those are the things you can learn about ahead of time. Information, through the county and through the organizations like Renters Alliance and from the free legal assistance. And again, you can get all those phone numbers and the connections, at the main Montgomery County government website with a /renters. It'll take you to a page. It'll also connect you with the rental assistance application page. So it's important to prepare and know that you do have these protections.
And Matt reminded me to say, there's no self-help eviction. If the sheriff doesn't show up at your gate, at your door, then you can't be evicted. The landlord can't just come change your locks or put your things outside. If he tries to do that, call the police. It's illegal.
And even beyond that, the sheriff is not going to come out of nowhere. You have to have had a case filed in court. A judge has to make a judgment against you, and there are several other steps. And then you will receive notice from the sheriff's department that is threatening that they're going to come and evict you. That is a judicial process that is required in order to evict somebody. If the landlord says, gives you a letter that says you have to be out in 10 days, if the landlord's lawyer issues a threatening note saying we want you out in 30 days, these do not have the force of law. And so, Rosie, again, what do they need to do if they get that kind of threat or the landlord takes any action?
The landlord can give you a letter saying anything he wants, but until he takes you to court, gets an order, and the sheriff shows up, he cannot put you out. And if he is doing this as harassment, call 311 and ask to speak to someone in the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs.
And we love hearing those stories, so give us a call. We landlords who start that nonsense will rue the day that they went down that path. But also, they can't reduce any of your services either. They can't turn off your heat or your electricity or your air conditioning. They can't change the locks on your doors. They can't take your key away from your mailbox. They can't reduce any such services to you as long as you are in possession of your apartment and there's no court order to evict you with the sheriff following through. Right, Rosie?
That's absolutely correct.
So the way I think we're trying to see if we were answering the questions that have been submitted. I think we've covered a lot of them. There are folks who are focused on additional resources beyond just rental assistance, and Department of Health and Human Services has assistance lines, but the I guess just opening up for Rosie or Lana, if you see anything that you think needs to be spoken to at this point.
Yeah, so there are two things that I caught that I wanted to mention. I do want to emphasize that we are operating currently under the Treasury's Emergency Rental Assistance Program 1 guidelines. In the last, I guess it was just about a week and a half ago, they came out with their round 2 guidelines. And so I know it can be very confusing because there are some things in those that are different, but we currently have round 1 funding. We have not yet received our round 2 allocation. And I know it makes it even more confusing because we are in round 3 of COVID rent relief. So we got all these different numbers going around, but we are following the Treasury guidance that we are supposed to be following. So, please bear with us. There is a lot of FAQs, program requirements, everything is on our website. So, please review that for there. The other thing that I just want to reiterate again is some of the statuses. There continues to be a number of questions. We are processing applications as quickly as we can. If you see a status that says your application is received and it is waiting for a landlord or a tenant match, then that means that whichever the other party is, if you are the landlord, that means your tenant has not done an application or the system has not identified them as matching. The system tries to match them off of names and addresses. So sometimes we do need to go in manually and do that ourselves. Or if you're the tenant, your landlord has not done the application yet. If it is under initial review, waiting for a caseworker, it is waiting for a caseworker. And again, we are processing the applications based on a variety of prioritization criteria. And I unfortunately cannot provide at this time any specific time frame of when your application will move from one stage to the other. So I do want to reiterate again, if you find yourself with a judgment, if you find yourself with that red and white notice, please do call up 311 and let them know you were experiencing or imminent eviction, so that we can check where your application is and try to get it moving. But I know I guess there's about 80 of us here on this call now. You are among, at this point, over 5,000 of your renter neighbors who are all vying for the rent assistance. And as the county executive said, we have the funds, we will push it out, but it does take us some time, unfortunately, to make sure that every application matches. And I will just share, I think someone gave me a good way to kind of frame it. Unfortunately, it's not like taxes. We think about our taxes that we file it. We tell the IRS that you should give me, a $2,000 refund. The IRS gives it to us, and then they review it afterwards. And 2, 3, 4 years later, they can come back and audit that return and try to reclaim funds. We unfortunately have to do that whole review and process before we can release the funds. So it's going to take us some time to get through all the applications to make sure we have all of your documentation and everything aligns with the program requirements we have to comply by. So I know it is, again, I know it is not easy. The anxiety of having to wait for that call, I'm sure is adding more stress than we ever want to be experiencing during this time. But please do know we are working literally around the clock to try to get them processed as quickly as we can.
Alana, there's a specific question about, can somebody get rent relief if they owe less than 1,000?
And unfortunately, you are not eligible to apply for COVID rent relief if you owe less than $1,000.
So if they owe less than 1,000, but they're still facing eviction, what should they do?
You should call 311 and say you are facing eviction.
And
I want to just couch that. Facing eviction means you have documentation from the court. It is not, as Rosie mentioned, you might get a letter from your landlord saying you need to leave in 10 days, or a letter from their lawyer saying we're going to kick you out or we're going to file for eviction if you don't pay. Unfortunately, our eviction prevention programs cannot intervene at that point. It does require court documentation for us to intervene.
It is somewhat tragic that some people are being evicted for small amounts of money that seem relatively easy to solve if we had a process to solve it.
Well, we do have funds, so you need to contact us though. There is no one who should be being evicted for owing $500 or $700. We do have funds, but again, you need to contact us. And please do not wait until the sheriff is standing outside your door that morning. As it was mentioned, you're going to get the notice of a court hearing. You're going to actually have that court hearing. You're going to get a judgment. You're going to get the notification from your landlord that the eviction has been scheduled. You're going to get that red and white from the sheriff's office saying they are about to be coming. Please, please, please don't wait until a week after you've gotten that red and white and the sheriff's actually at your door. We do want to help you before that point.
Thank you. Frank?
One thing I just want to add that I see a number of questions that I think we need to restate that the county government process, there was an air conditioning concern. If the air conditioning is not working and your temperature in your unit is greater than 80 degrees, which is the requirement that the air conditioning function to the point that it can serve that, and any other code issues, property issues, the 311 is the portal, the access to the service, and you file a complaint, a service request is generated. Dan McHugh and his team and will respond on the code questions, issues, complaints. Rosie McCray Moody and her team will respond on any landlord tenant. But even though the buildings are still closed and we're working toward opening, all of our staff are working and responding to many hundreds of complaints. And so I just want to reassure there is a process and it is responsive. It can take some time to figure out all the resolution, but we will respond and we'll get it in process. So it's important to make that complaint and receive a service request, and then we will be following up with you.
Dan, do you want to add anything on that? I know the AC law doesn't require air conditioning to be on until June 1st. But if you have functioning air conditioning in your building, it does need to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is communicate with your property manager or the owner to find out, if they have in turn flipped it over from heat to cool. That's the first step. A lot of these larger buildings, it's not just flicking a switch. It does take a few days to change over, cool down, etc. So, just be patient with that, but do communicate with your property owners or managers to see if there is an issue, if they have in fact flipped over. And if you are having issues, that's going to be your first, point of contact is your property manager or owner. Let them know that your AC is not working. And if they fail to come out and make repairs, please do give us a call. We're open for business. Service requests, anywhere from, something small to something large, we handle those. The staff will be out to discuss with you and try to get it repaired in a timely manner.
Dan, can you, this comes up frequently because we often have a confusion over what the role of Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs is versus code. What are the most common kinds of complaints that code is dealing with that would distinguish you from the Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs?
Well, code enforcement handles property maintenance issues. So if anything is wrong in your unit itself, then give us, call 311 and report it through, for code enforcement, housing complaint. Anything relating to the lease or amenities or anything like that would be landlord tenant.
So we're talking about for code things like vermin, broken appliances, water leaks. What else?
Any kind of maintenance issue, holes in the walls, rodents, solid waste, leaks, damaged walls, paint, missing tiles, floor tiles, any kind of, maintenance issue within a unit exterior would be a code enforcement matter.
So I think just hearkening back to what the county executive said earlier, obviously there's been a kind of a tamp down because of the COVID pandemic and the inability and desire not to send inspectors into danger. But we're going to be reopening in the next coming months. And one thing that we know from over the years is that neither landlord, tenant, or code can do their jobs as effectively as they could if you don't make a complaint. Right. So you have to actually call and let them be aware of the problem. You can also contact us and we will help you to make them be aware of the problem and follow through. But once you file a complaint, it becomes part of the process, and they do have responsiveness requirements. But if you don't tell them, if you allow your refrigerator to be broken for 3 months, then I don't know what you're thinking, but they can't do anything about it.
Right.
So please make sure that they are aware of these complaints. Frank Demarais, we've got a few more minutes, but one of the things I was hoping you could address is what are the differences now, if any, in the COVID sanitary requirements for apartment communities now that we're opening up? Has anything changed?
Well, first, the face covering requirement follows the county standards, which are evolving. You have to stay up with it almost daily, but right now, the guidance is out there for the vaccinated persons to not require face coverings indoors, even amongst persons that you're not in the same household with. So the guideline remains in place for those that are not vaccinated, and there's no way of checking, who's vaccinated. We're in this, period now where it's unclear what the face covering guidelines mean, depending on the honesty and best efforts of the persons to follow the guidelines. The cleaning guidelines from the CDC are also evolving. We're following the CDC guidelines. We will be updating as we can get clarity, but for the current time being, the guidelines remain as posted, and, to require regular cleaning of surfaces, high touch surfaces. But we know that the CDC is evolving. I know Dan was looking at that, and we're trying to figure out how to get that clarified and communicated. So for the current period, we're not changing things till we can confirm CDC guidance, but it is evolving very quickly, and everyone should expect updated guidance. And when we do, we share that with property managers in the multifamily properties. They had requirements for special notices, and we provided additional signage to support the guidance. And we have to go through a process of updating that and providing new guidance to your landlord in the multi-unit buildings.
Okay, thank you. If there's any last questions, you better put them in the chat. We promise to start on time and end on time. Any questions for Frank Demarais, the Deputy Director of Housing, for the Head of Code Enforcement? Dan?
Matt, there was one
Yes,
question I saw that I think is important to address. There was a question about someone who got, if I understood it correctly, they received a deferred judgment from their eviction hearing. And their question is whether they're going to have another hearing after June, after the expiration of the moratoriums. So I think it's really important. I don't know, I can try to answer, but I don't know, Rosie or Frank, if you wanted to take this more.
Let me clarify as best we have, and it's not ironclad from the courts, but the judgment is reserved, which means it's simply held on the date of expiration, which might be June 30, July 1. That judgment becomes active, and it moves to the same status as if the judgment was issued without any reservation. There's a period for restitution, and then there's a period for the landlord to seek a writ of possession, which is an eviction writ, and then that moves forward to the sheriff's office to implement. There is no second court date. So when you get that delay, you're getting a delay, but you're not getting protection beyond the end of whenever that protection expires. The CDC order has been extended from the end of December to the end of January to hopefully the end of June, if no further court action. And the governor's executive order is month to month. And we have to stand by for when the governor will declare the end of the state of emergency. If that were to be also June 30th, anyone who had protection under the governor's order, their judgment would become enforceable at that point. You can still work with your landlord. Landlords waiting for payment of rent. If you're in process with your rental assistance, the hope and expectation and the emails we're sending and the communication we're making through the landlord community is to work with the tenants receiving rental assistance to delay and defer action. Even when they get a judgment, they can sit on that. They don't have to immediately seek possession. But you can work with your landlord to work with you as you receive the rental assistance.
And if you have any questions, again, please contact the Renters Alliance, info@rentersalliance.org. You can also call 311 to get assistance from HHS or from Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs or code enforcement. We're just about done here. Let me again thank our renters for bravely coming up and addressing their county leaders and asking for service. Mr. Wayne Collins from Bethesda, Ms. Pat Beckham from downtown Silver Spring, Ms. Carol McSween Brooks from Kensington. Thank you especially for joining us this evening and putting questions and concerns to the county leadership. Frank Demaray, Deputy Director of Housing and Community Affairs, Rosie McCray Moody, the Manager of Office of Landlord and Tenant Affairs, Dan McHugh, Manager of Code Enforcement, my good friend Lorraine Driscoll from DHCA, keeping track of questions and keeping us honest, Alana Branda, who's managing this incredible task of getting these funds out the door to thousands of tenants in desperate need, a real partner. My colleague and friend, Chris Perry, on the board of directors, William Roberts, who's put his child to bed, the chair of our board who was with us, of course, the county executive, Mark Elrich, and the county council president, Tom Hucker, my board member, Delegate Janelle Wilkins, who also joined us to say hello, and of course, to all of the good staff, including Dale Tibbetts, who's monitoring 6 meetings at once on this call. So thank you all very much, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.